Here's a psychological fact you're not ready for. Learning to be alone changes your mind, but not always in the way you think. Psychology has observed something disturbing. People who learn to be alone don't become cold. They become deeply different. And if you recognize yourself in this video, you're probably already living it. Before we dive in, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt more comfortable being alone than trying to connect with people? Have you ever pushed someone away, not because you didn't care, but because caring felt dangerous? If you answered yes, this video is for you. I'm going to break down 5 psychological traits that emerge in people who learn to be alone. And I have to warn you, some of these might hurt, not because they're cruel, but because they're true. So if you're ready to understand why you are the way you are, let's begin. Trait 1. Extreme emotional independence. Trait number 1. Extreme emotional independence. People who learn to be alone develop emotional independence far above average, not because they don't need anyone, but because their mind learned that depending on others hurts. Let me explain what happens in the brain. When you're young, your brain is wired to seek connection. It's called attachment theory. We're biologically programmed to need others for survival and emotional regulation. But here's what happens when that need is repeatedly unmet. Your brain makes a clear association. When I need someone, nobody shows up. So it adapts. It learns to self-soothe, to solve problems alone, to stop asking. At first, this feels like strength. You become the person who doesn't need anyone, the one who handles everything independently, the reliable one. But there's a psychological cost. Your nervous system starts treating vulnerability as danger. Needing someone becomes a threat, not a natural human experience. And here's the painful part. With time, you don't just stop needing people. You forget how to let someone take care of you. Think about it. When was the last time you asked for help without minimizing it? When was the last time you fully accepted support without feeling like you owed something in return? If you can't remember, that's the trait showing up. The psychologist John Bowlby, who developed attachment theory, said something powerful. What cannot be communicated to the mother cannot be communicated to the self. In other words, when your emotional needs were dismissed early on, you learned to dismiss them too. You don't say, "I'm struggling," because your mind learned that saying it changes nothing. You don't say, "I need you," because your mind learned that needing leads to disappointment. So you become functionally independent, but emotionally isolated. And that brings us to the second trait, which explains why even when you do connect with someone, you never feel completely safe. Trait 2. Emotional hypervigilance. Trait number 2. Emotional hypervigilance. Prolonged loneliness trains your brain to anticipate abandonment. People with this trait read silences, changes in tone, unanswered messages as potential threats. This isn't insecurity. This is emotional memory. Let me break down the neuroscience. Your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for detecting threats, becomes hypersensitive to social cues. It's constantly scanning for signs. Are they pulling away? Are they losing interest? Is this the beginning of the end? And here's why this happens. Your brain is trying to protect you. It thinks, if I detect rejection early, it'll hurt less. So you start reading into everything. A short text becomes, "They don't care anymore." A canceled plan becomes, "I'm not a priority." A moment of silence becomes, "Something's wrong." You're not paranoid. You're just conditioned. Your mind learned that connection is temporary, so it's always preparing for the loss. And here's the heartbreaking part. Many times you leave first, not because you don't want to stay, but because you already know how it ends. Psychologists call this preemptive abandonment. You reject before you can be rejected. You distance before you can be left. You convince yourself it doesn't matter before it starts to matter too much, because needing someone for you has always ended in emptiness. This is where the psychology gets painful. People who spent too much time alone don't fear being alone. They fear needing someone again, because needing, for them, always led to nothing. And that conditioning doesn't just go away when someone good shows up. It intensifies, which leads us to trait 3. Trait 3. Excessive emotional self-control. Trait number 3. Excessive emotional self-control. Another common trait is extreme control over emotions. You don't explode. You don't complain. You don't ask. You keep everything inside. Your mind learned that expressing emotions doesn't guarantee support, only exposure, so you become functional but disconnected from what you actually feel. On the outside, you look strong. On the inside, you're exhausted. Let me give you a real example. Someone cancels plans last minute. It hurts, but you respond with, "No worries, totally fine." Someone forgets something important to you. You don't mention it, you just make a mental note. Someone asks, "Are you okay?" And you say, "Yeah, I'm good," even when you're falling apart. Why? Because your brain learned that being emotional is risky. When you were younger, maybe expressing sadness was met with dismissal, maybe anger was punished, maybe vulnerability was ignored, so you stopped showing it. And over time, you didn't just stop showing emotions to others. You stopped allowing yourself to feel them fully. Psychologists call this emotional suppression, and research shows it has serious consequences. A study from the University of Texas found that people who chronically suppress emotions have higher rates of anxiety, depression, and even physical health issues like cardiovascular problems, because emotions don't disappear when you ignore them. They just go underground. They show up as tension in your body, as exhaustion, as numbness. You become so used to holding everything in that even when someone safe shows up, you can't let it out. And that's the cruelest part of this trait. You've become so good at not needing anyone that even when someone wants to be there for you, you don't know how to receive it. Which brings us to trait 4. And this one cuts deep. Trait 4, difficulty receiving genuine love. Trait number 4, difficulty receiving genuine love. People who learn to be alone don't distrust love. They distrust its duration. When someone gets too close, your nervous system activates, not because you don't want them, but because your mind asks, when are they going to leave? This makes you minimize gestures, doubt intentions, and downplay what you receive, not because it doesn't matter, but because you learn not to get your hopes up. Let me paint a picture you might recognize. Someone tells you they love you. Instead of feeling joy, you feel suspicion. Someone does something kind. Instead of accepting it, you think, what do they want? Someone stays when things get hard. Instead of feeling grateful, you think, they'll leave eventually anyway. This isn't cynicism. This is protection. Your brain is trying to shield you from future pain by refusing to believe in present safety. Psychologist Dr. Sue Johnson, who developed emotionally focused therapy, explains it like this. When we've been hurt, our brain learns that closeness equals danger. So even when safe love shows up, our system treats it as a threat. And here's the tragedy. You can be with someone who genuinely cares and still feel alone, because the walls you built to survive loneliness don't automatically come down just because someone good arrives. In fact, they might get higher, because now there's something to lose. So you test them, push them away to see if they'll stay, create distance to see if they'll fight for you. Not consciously, but your wounded mind does it anyway. And when they do stay, you still don't fully believe it, because your past taught you that people leave, that love is conditional, that you're easier to abandon than to keep. So you brace yourself. You keep one foot out the door. You never fully let your guard down, not because you don't want to, but because you don't know how. And that brings us to the 5th and final trait. And this one is actually beautiful. Trait number 5, deep connection with very few people. The last trait is paradoxical. These people don't want many relationships, but when they do connect, they do it deeply. They don't seek quantity, they seek safety. That's why they filter, observe, and take time to open up. But when someone manages to cross that barrier, the connection is intense, loyal, and real, because they don't love out of this habit. They love by choice. Let me explain why this happens. When you've learned to be alone, you become incredibly selective about who you let in. You're not interested in surface-level friendships. Small talk feels exhausting. Casual connections feel meaningless. You want depth or nothing. And when you finally find someone who feels safe, someone who sees you, stays consistent, and doesn't run when things get real, you don't just care about them, you protect them fiercely. You show up. You remember. You're loyal in a way most people never experience, because you know what it's like to be alone, and you never want someone you love to feel that way. This is why people who learn to be alone often make the most devoted friends, partners, and family members, not because they need you, but because they chose you. And that choice means everything. So here's the truth. If you learn to be alone, it doesn't mean you're destined to stay there. Here's the real psychological trick. It's not about stopping being strong. It's about allowing yourself to be vulnerable without abandoning yourself. Let me say that again. You don't have to choose between being independent and being connected. You can be both. You can be strong and still ask for help. You can be self-sufficient and still let someone care for you. You can protect yourself and still take the risk of being seen. Start with something small. Don't solve everything alone. Let someone in on one thing, one struggle, one moment of weakness. See what happens when you don't carry it all by yourself. You might be surprised. Not everyone will leave. Not everyone will disappoint you. And the ones who stay, they're worth the risk. Because healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in safe connection. You learn to be alone because you had to. But you don't have to stay that way. If this video put words to things you've never been able to explain, hit that like button and subscribe. We talk about what nobody taught. You about the mind, emotions, and invisible wounds. Because you're not broken, you're just healing, and that takes time. See you in the next one.